Pardon me, just a minor technical difficulty. Hold on just a minute. Okay. Prostrate spurs. I mentioned a few minutes ago. Y'all, can you see now?
It's not showing an individual slide. It's just showing your PowerPoint.
All right. We were just talking about prostrate spurge. Again, that's a tough weed. You have to use Roundup. If you use it, sometimes you have to hit this weed more than once in order to get it under control. It's a tough weed that, as I said, it survives those asphalt and concrete cracks. Now this right here is one that's a real problem. Chamber bitter. Now this thing is weed. They look like little mimosa trees. They come out during the summer months and really can produce large numbers of seeds and become an issue. Again, it's like the prostrate spurge. If you spray it with Roundup, it may have to do it a couple times. I mean, that's how tough of a weed it is. Hand pulling in your vegetable garden, if you got that, it's really your best method. And of course, Roundup, but if you got that growing in desirable plants, you don't want to use Roundup. It might hurt your vegetables. But this one right here can just be, believe me, this is a real troublesome weed. All right, here we go. This is one we were talking a little while ago about pigweed, spiny amaranth. There's several different species of it. This can be a real problem in row crop agriculture. Not quite as much in ornamentals, but you still have them. We mentioned one plant can produce 200 to 500,000 seeds, maybe more. And they're very, very difficult. As I said, in like corn and cotton fields, they have chemicals to try to bring them under control, but it produces large numbers of seeds with germination inhibitors. So my colleagues down in Tifton, this is one that keeps them very busy. Virginia buttonweed, spreading perennial with hairy branch stems. It's common in lawns and gardens. Reproduces by seeds, roots, and stem fragments. A lot of times I've noticed this tends to like moist areas, lower moist areas more. So, if you got area, but this thing, hand pulling or spraying, a couple different methods of controlling. So we're going to go in our winter annual weeds. They germinate in the late fall to early winter, complete their life cycle in late spring to early summer. I think everybody is familiar with this, the annual bluegrass, Poa annua. It likes compacted soils, but will grow in any soil. They germinate in the early fall. An identifying feature is their tufted growth, and you can see that the boat-shaped tips of their leaves. They have those little tufted white seeds that are growing and can reproduce in large numbers. And pre-emergent weed control is the best because turfgrass managers will really, this is a real problem. But this can be, it's become resistant to some herbicides. So something we need that can be, we'll talk about resistance later. I think everybody knows about chickweed. See this all over the place in the winter. It has it produces large numbers of seeds, grows in mats, low growing, spreading. They have small white flowers, but the one thing, they're easy to pull up out of the ground. But this is another real problem weed. Henbit, which is in the mint family, which means it has a square stem. It it germinates in the fall and grows to the late winter to spring, and you'll see it out all over the place with those purple lavender flowers. Now, there's another weed that looks kind of like henbit. is called purple dead nettle. Closely related, and it has a triangular shape. The leaves up near the head, they're sort of conical triangular shape, and they're often purple colored. But basically, they do the same thing, and they're controlled the same way. So they're different. They're slightly different. They're different species of the. Basically, they're slightly different species of the same weed. Some of you probably have encountered the hairy bittergrass. It's in the same family, the cole family, which is related to collards, broccoli, turnips, and so forth. But it's not for eating. It produces the little white flowers, and you see those seed pods. You break one, it says it can go to seed to flower in less than 10 days. So it's prolific seed producer, and seeds can be thrown from the pods up to 20 feet. So it knows how to make copies of itself all over the place. So this can be another real problem weed. This is a Carolina geranium. It's not the good geranium that you like. We think of geraniums like our regular geraniums and scented geraniums, but this is a geranium. It germinates in the fall, grows slowly, and then toward the end of the winter and the spring, when it becomes warmer, it really starts becoming apparent. It produces little white or pink flowers that are that are not noticeable, and its seed pod is a long conical structure. Is sometimes called crane's bill. There are many nice geraniums, but not this one. You need to get rid of this one if you have it. Biennial weeds, a plant that lives for 2 years. The first year they germinate, produce vegetative growth, and the second year they flower and produce seed. Queen Anne's lace, mentioned that before. This can be a desirable plant in some places. It's a nice for the garden. I've seen it grown, and then of course you see them in meadows along sides of the road in June. They come out in the first year is the vegetative growth. The second year they produce the flowers and seeds. It's actually a wild carrot. Docus carota. This is common mullein, however it's pronounced. A lot of us have seen. See those leaves? They're kind of what they call tomentose or hairy, and they produce these large inflorescences, these spikes of flowers and seeds that they put up. They can be a foot or more and 18 inches tall, and you can see a lot of them growing in natural areas, coming out in the woods and stuff like that. Bull thistle. There are several different species of thistle, but they're pretty much all very similar. If you're familiar with artichokes are a giant version of this. It's a species, and the flower buds is what's harvested. It's a giant version. This thistle right here, again, it produces its vegetative growth the first year and comes back the second year as flowers. If you're going to pull this out of your garden, make sure you have thick gloves, or these spines will really stick your hands bad. You will know it. That if you touch it without gloves, you know they don't want to be messed with. So you have to a little patience in getting this under control. Let's talk about our perennial broadleaf weeds, a plant that can persist more than 2 years, that can reproduce either through seeds or vegetative structures, roots, tubers, rhizomes, stolons, and so forth. Here we go to our favorite, the common dandelion. It's noted for its yellow flowers and its windblown seeds. It's actually edible. People I know eat it. So it has all parts of the plant, the root. Of course, if you're going to pull it by hand, you need to get that long tap root or it come back. This is a common weed. in all places. I keep thinking of that book by Ray Bradbury, Dandelion Wine. So I'm not familiar with it, but I'm sure they could make that's. I'm sure that can be made, but I have to check that out. Wild violet. This is another edible plant, but it's a bad weed. It's hard to control, especially selectively in turf grasses. I'll talk about turf grass, but this, because as master gardeners, you're going to get a lot of calls about turf grasses, uh, even though that's not the only system we're talking about. So just wild violets, it can be invasive at times. Its flowers can be purple, pink, or white. I say invasive in nature, even though it's native. It has fleshy roots and stems. And if you use Roundup, again, you'll have to hit it a couple times to control it. I think we've all seen this tall, feathery plant, dog fennel. I noticed where it says eupatorium. That's related to Joe Pye weed, if you've ever heard of that. That comes out. It's a desirable flower that comes out this summer and blooms late summer and fall. But this isn't something you want. It grows. I've seen it grow up to 3 or 4 feet tall. Lands that have been cleared. A lot of time, this is one of the first things it likes to move in and take over. So you'll see this, and best thing to do is to pull it out by hand when it gets this big. Here's one, horse nettle. Horse nettle has thorns on it. It is related to tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and eggplant. You can look at the flowers similar to the ones on those other plants, and it produces these little small tomato fruits. And again, you need to have those gloves if you're going to be pulling it, because it has those thorns on it. It can be a weed. In some places it's problematic, but it's often gets infested with flea beetles and powdery mildew. So there's a little bit of natural control on it. Now, there's a cousin of this called a Tropica soda apple that's a much larger. It can grow 5, 6 feet tall and form thickets in pastures. It's an invasive weed in South Georgia, and that will be discussed next week when we get into invasive species. So you just remember, I'll discuss that in more detail, but it's a relative to horse nettle. This is not the invasive one. Tony's foot or dichondra. That's a low growing. It's low growing on the ground. It creeps with roots that it produces creeping stems that root at the nodes. In some places like South Florida and Southern California, it's used as a lawn. They'll have whole lawns of these, but don't not try that up here. It doesn't work here in the metro area. I know that there's also the horticulturists have been trying to make some ornamental ground covers. You could use that in certain areas as ground covers. Again, it may be, we talk about a weed as a plant where it's not wanted. In some places this may be desirable, but a lot of places it's not. Broadleaf plantain. This is quite common. Distinctive set of rosette leaves that are broad and oval shaped. It has leafless stems that terminate in dense flower spikes. Very common, seen around here. And its cousin, the buckhorn plantain. Distinctive rosette leaves. Slender fibrous root system. The leaves are narrow and often twisted. It has a tall, leafless, hairy stalk with dense flower spike and reproduces by seed. Those little seedlings up there at the top. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about what this thing is, poison ivy. It's common. It can be shrub form. It can be the form of a vine, A lot of people ask me, well, you know, is it poison oak? Well, poison oak is more of a shrub form, and the leaves look a little more like oaks. However, that's not that common around here. It's more out on the west coast, west of here. Leaves have an oil that causes dermatitis. It irritates your skin, and can be, some people are highly allergic to it. I'm going to talk to y'all next week about a weed that looks like a giant Queen Anne's lake that's an invasive that can cause serious skin irritations, and just kind of a little preview of what's coming up on the invasive plant lecture. It's not related to poison ivy, but poison ivy, very common around here. The old saying, leaves of three, leave it be, although not all plants that have three leaves, like little leaflets like that, are poison ivy. Now, if you look behind there, you'll see this 5-leaf. That's Virginia creeper. Sometimes that's mistaken for poison ivy. I had somebody send me a picture by email yesterday and said, "Oh, is this poison ivy? It's taking over my." Said, "No, that's Virginia creeper." Some places it's a desirable vine. It does produce pretty red foliage in the fall, but poison ivy is definitely something you don't want around, and if you're controlling it, you need to take measures to protect yourself from getting that oil on you, or you're gonna have you're gonna know that you had been exposed to it. Perennial grassy weeds, a plant that can persist more than 2 years. It can reproduce through either seeds or vegetative structures. Again, roots, tubers, rhizomes, and stolons. This is Dallas grass. Best to be dug out or controlled by Roundup. There's no in lawns. Again, I'm talking some about I'll refer some about turf, because whether I don't know how much you'll be working with turf, but you will get questions from homeowners about their lawns in the metro area. Dallas grass, there's no the type of weed killers. We're going to talk about selective that kills certain plants and not harm other plants. There's really not here for Dallas grass and turf grasses. They used to have some that were taken off the market for commercial. So basically, use Roundup, and if you use Roundup, you got to hit it a couple of times. It's another tough weed, or dig it out. So basically, those are your options with Dallas grass. Wild garlic. It's a cool season perennial with hollow leaves. Underground bulb bears offset bulblets enclosed in a membrane, and it reproduces by seeds, bulblets, and aerial bulbs. So you see how you get a large number of these little leaflets coming out. Now, closely related is the wild onion. You don't get as many of these leaflets coming out, these little blades, and they tend to be larger. And the stalk that the flower and the seeds and aerial bulbs are larger. It has a fibrous coat on the central bulb, no offset bulblets, and leaves that arise from the base of the flowering stem. So it's a little different. So I'll flip back and show you that it's wild garlic and wild onions. But they're basically do the same thing, and they're actually both edible. I've tried both of them, but it's real strong. It's not like your sweet Vidalia onions, I can tell you that. But anyhow, sedges, we're going to go back to the sedges just to review. They're monocots. They have triangular stems that are solid, 3-rank leaves, spread by rhizomes, overwinter as tubers, and tubers often introduced in topsoil. Now, there's 2 different main types of sedges that we need to think about: is yellow nutsedge and purple nutsedge. Yellow nutsedge is perennial. It has leaves that are light green, glossy, and grass-like. The inflorescence is a terminal. That's the flowers that are these little yellow spikelets, hence why they call it yellow. It can be aggressive. The tubers, even if it's pulled up by the roots, they can be problem that they can remain. There's a little nut. That's where they get the name. These little tubers look like nutlets. So if you pull one up, you'll see it. They especially can take over they thrive in wetland areas, wet sites. They're not invasive, they're native. They're actually is what is called chufa, which is considered is planted in wildlife plots for like especially wild turkey. So again, a weed in one place and desirable in another place. This is purple nutsedge. It tapers. One thing that I meant to say about the yellow nutsedge, and we'll talk about this a little bit, the leaves taper to a sharp point, and the purple nutsedge, they taper to a blunt point. I'll show you that in just a minute. Purple nutsedge, the flowers are purple in color. It also can be aggressive. And growing, and this tends to be a little more south of here. I don't see quite as much of that, and I don't see much of this in the metro area. But again, our farmers, and they really have fun dealing with this. Again, my weed science friends down there in Tifton, this is something else they have to worry about. Now, yellow nutsedge, you can look at the difference. You see the differences in the flower heads, the inflorescences, and then the yellow nutsedge tapers to a sharp point, and a purple nutsedge to a broad point, a blunt point. But you're going to find more yellow nutsedge than purple nutsedge around here. I just thought I'd throw this one in there. Green Kalinga, which is perennial sedge. It's a low-growing. Seed heads round or oblong with 3 short leaves below. It prefers low areas with more moist soil. I see this some around here as well, so you may come across the green Kalinga. Now it's a sedge, but it doesn't grow that tall, unlike the purple and yellow nutsedge. I think we've talked about this before, but we mentioned Bermuda grass. It's a perennial grassy weed, and it's desirable when we have our Bermuda grass lawns. That's is a lawn grass. They're one of the best. They are tough. They can handle hot weather. They can handle dry conditions, compacted soil, but they don't like shade. So that's the one area I get people calling. You may get people calling you just like I do. Says, I got Bermuda grass that won't grow in the shade. Well, it's not going to grow in the shade. But and that's the same with but when it gets to be a weed, of course, as a weed, it won't grow in the shade. But in sunny areas, it can just take over and be problematic, and can be a chore to control. So it can be a weed. Control the grassy weeds. I'm going to basically pre-emergent herbicides are the best in turf grasses. I'm going in other areas. You can use Roundup or hand pull. If they're in your vegetable garden, I always say in vegetable gardens, it's best not to use any weed killers, because if you kill whatever will kill the weed, will kill the plant. Turf grasses, we talk our turf grass managers like, oh yeah, crabgrass. It's better to use it during this, better to control it because with their pre-emergence, because once they come up, they're harder to control since they're grass and are desirable turfs of grass. Waging the war on weeds, which is it's a nonstop war, and I always say the weeds always seem to be getting the upper hand. Cultural, physical, biological, chemical method. Cultural method is to promote vigorous growth and development of the landscape planting. Have your soil tested, make sure it has the appropriate pH and fertility. Plant adapted species. I have a presentation that I gave earlier this week called Right Plant for the Right Place. I've given it to homeowners, and also have given it to green industry, for the landscape nursery professionals, and about putting the right plant in the right place. And with those people, I'm still not getting through to them. I hate to say it. Cultivation, like vertical mowing, aeration, and turf. Helping to control thatch, hoeing, pulling it out by hand. Water management's very important. Make sure it gets the adequate amount of water. You don't want to overwater. Drainage is important. Insects and disease control. Plants that are infected with insects and disease are not as healthy and become aren't growing as dense, and the weeds can take over. Now, a lot of times, that's why you get a thick growing of plants. Let's say you're growing squash, which is about our squash planting time as it is. What they come out as little seedlings, and of course they're little. You got to control the weeds. They can be problematic, but once they get to be pretty tall and they get those big leaves, you don't have as much trouble with them. I mean, the weeds aren't as problematic because they're shaded out. Hand pulling and hoeing. Good weed control for small weeds. Generally easier to control annuals. That's a good thing. Control the weeds while they're small. It's easier to control them and before they get too big and established. Of course, in my community garden, as I said, I go out there every couple of days, and the weeds always seem to be one step ahead of me. I don't know why, but I'm just saying they can be a chore to keep under control. But you have to be vigilant with them. Sometimes biological methods, insects like weevils. There are certain types have been controlling the musk thistle or milk thistle, which is related to the bull thistle that I showed you earlier. Grazing animals and grass carp. Here's a picture I have of some goats. Sheep can be used as well. They graze. They go up there, and you got areas of privet and kudzu and everything else, and they'll eat it and eat meat because these can be animals can be real eating machines. I can assure you. Then of course you have to bring them out again if it resprouts, or once before as it's resprouting, hit it with Roundup or some other chemical label for that control. You have to do it a few times, but that'll eventually get rid of it. There are some companies that actually rent these critters out. And several, I know Peachtree City has used this for vegetation control. City of Atlanta, I believe Norcross has used them. And if you go up at Buford Dam around Lake Lanier, you'll see they use them on the dam to keep the grass mowed instead of having people mowing it. They do a good job at mowing grass too. The problem is, I read of a situation where some subdivision, somebody had used these things to clear out some vegetation, and they had a pin around them to keep them, and somehow the pin got knocked down, and there were dozens of goats in everybody's yards eating everything. So if you use them, make sure you keep them where you want them. Grass carp are used to control some undergraduate, some aquatic weeds. They're used, and these are big fish. They're related to koi, and they're related to goldfish, and they do a pretty good job. Fishing, it can be fun to catch the fish, but they're not. I understand they don't have a pleasant taste, although some people eat them without any problem. Physical removal and barriers, hoeing and hand removal, mowing, cultivation, mulches and landscape fabrics. Mowing is useful in turf and pastures. Yeah, I get questions about pastures. That's let's say they Bermuda grass. That's used in pastures, but it's different type in a different situation than what you have on a lawn. Mowing reduces seed production of weeds if done before flowering. These are some weeds right here that are controlled. Some are controlled. I mentioned dog fennel's one. Johnson grass. Some of these I didn't talk about, but there's so many. I just picked out the main one. Why does it control these tall growing weeds? It reduces the apical dominance of the main stem. Continued clipping depletes root carbohydrates and prevents seed formation. But these certain low-growing ones like the crabgrass, annual bluegrass, Virginia buttonweed, Lespedeza, spurge, nutsedge, their growing point is located below the mowing blade, so it doesn't do a job. Really doesn't. Mowing doesn't control those. Preventative method: weed seed, seed and plant material. When you go and you buy pots, flower in containers, best thing to do is you look at the plants, and if you see weeds growing out of them, you may want to think twice about purchasing them. Also, when we're talking about grass seed, you want to see where it's certified seed through the Georgia Crop Improvement Association or the Department of Agriculture, which most of the seed is, but also sod. You want to make sure, because if you don't have, you'll end up with something kind of like this, weeds coming out of where you sod it. If you're having a landscaper sod, make sure they show you that one of this certification that the sod has been certified free of noxious weeds. Some years ago, I had a landscaper call me. They had just installed 10,000 square feet of Meyer zoysia, and said he had nothing but the nutsedge growing, most likely the yellow nutsedge. So he sent me pictures, and all I could see was nutsedge. 10,000 square feet of nutsedge. He asked me, what can I do? I said, you're going to have to get Roundup and spray it all out. And he says, well, that'll kill the grass. I said, you don't have any grass. Do you get certified sod? Well, no, but it was cheap. Bingo. That's why it's cheap. So we had to redo the whole thing over again. And you got the certified sod, he wouldn't have that problem. You know, cultivation advantages: control most weeds quickly and easily. Disadvantages: can be expensive, delayed by weather, and sometimes more cropping situations can hit the roots. Mulch is a great thing to use for weed control. Now, the blanket on the bottom right is what we call jute mesh. That's used on slopes. Does a good job, too, of helping to hold the soil in. You have little staples that you put in there to hold it in place. Pine straw is excellent. Cypress mulch, pine bark, the big pine bark or the little mini nuggets work. Wood chips are great. But you don't want to use marble, lava rock, or gravel. The reason why is because they hold heat, absorb heat, and can cook your plants. Now, if you're growing cacti and desert plants, you'd be fine, but anything else, that's not good. These are good mulches to have. Also, we talk about matting. Do not use plastic matting, because it inhibits air and water infiltration, and if the soil's moist, it can keep it too moist, and you end up with root rot. Now, you may see in commercial vegetable production that they use plastic, and they plant the vegetables in little holes in the plastic, but that is a very specialized situation where they have, they're able to make it work. But for us, we need to avoid the plastic and use landscape fabrics, garden mats that are permeable, and put that in. It allows air and water infiltration and will reduce the weeds. Like in this situation with these beans, I have seen newspapers used. That can be used. But don't use like glossy magazines or anything like that. Herbicides, a chemical that is used to control, suppress, or kill weeds. It's a type of pesticides. You got insecticides for insects, fungicides for fungi, herbicides. I always tell you, regardless of the chemical, if it's a pesticide, it's meant to kill something. First of all, identify the weed. can this be applied? You know, you may see on directions where it says don't put on certain, don't make sure this isn't put on vegetables or used around vegetables. Follow label directions. We're going to have well, I'm going to go into label directions in a few minutes. Avoid drift. Drift is where it's being blown on other, air blows it, or sometimes if it gets real hot, it volatilizes. There's a specific one type of broadleaf weed killer called dicamba, which is in our lawn weed killers, herbicides, but it's also used in commercial uh, agriculture. And there's been cases of it drifting from somebody's farm over to someone else's farm. And there's been some serious situations, acts of violence, fortunately not in Georgia, but in other states that have occurred. Our state is using something, our extension down in Tipton has put together these using pesticide wisely to educate farmers about this particular herbicide, dicamba, and pesticides in general. And I got to, credit Stanley Culpepper, our weed scientist in Tipton, that's really had spearheaded that and has had great results. But it's something, even if, just hearing your homeowner, just be aware of the drift. I always tell lawn care professionals, be very careful, because I trained them that, we can get drift and get into vegetable gardens and harm vegetables and other things. Pesticides have 3 names.
Hey,
it's like the C.S. Lewis.
Tim, this is Lisa. Hey, Tim.
Yeah?
This is Lisa.
Uh-huh.
I'm getting some requests for you to slow down a little bit more and to slow down on the slide change too, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, chemical name, active ingredients, you got that long chemical name. The common name is the shorter name that the EPA recognizes as a substitute for the chemical name of the product, glyphosate. Trade name, brand name or product name like Roundup. They all have the 3 names. Check. All right, well, I'll slow down. But anyhow, does everybody get this? Remember, chemical names, common names, trade names. 3 names. Oh, come on. Herbicides, we got the selectivity. Selective herbicides kill some plants, but not others. Broadleaf weed killers on turf grasses work fine. That's an example. Non-selective herbicide kills any plant material it touches. Roundup, glyphosate. In theory, it controls any plant material it touches. That's not always true. Susceptible weeds are killed or injured by an herbicide. Then there's tolerant weeds are naturally unaffected by an herbicide. Like let's say it controls broadleaf weeds but doesn't harm grassy weeds and sedges. Resistant weeds were susceptible but have developed a tolerance to herbicides. That's been problematic in row crop agriculture where they use lots of herbicides. They've had some, especially with pigweed. You see where that can be a problem. That's one of the reasons why they're having a lot of problems with that weed down there, commercial crops. Resistance to any type of pesticide is to keep applying the same thing over and over again. The weed or the bug or whatever will get resistant. It's like antibiotic resistance. That's it's the same principle, essentially. Okay, pre-emergent herbicides applied to turf before weed seeds germinate. This is an example of Scott's Halts. There's several different types. Going to be for lawns, but there's also some for flower beds and vegetables. It's PREEN, preen. That can also, and that has pretty good results. I can often see commercial landscapers that put flower beds in and they don't put preen out. Sometimes it becomes pretty noticeable. I saw a bed near me where I lived at some commercial place that had flowers, but they had more chamber bitter than flowers. But you know, that's something. But it does work pretty good. Now, when I say pre-emergent, doesn't mean it's going to get every single weed, but it will greatly reduce. You could post-emergence herbicide applied to kill weed seedlings plus established weed like Weed Be Gone, you know, Ortho Weed Be Gone. Put your pre-emergent application date. So these are the times: September 1st to October 15th here in North Georgia. That's the time to put your pre-emergence out to control the weeds. Spring is March 1st to 30th. So if you haven't put anything out to control crabgrass, you're too late. Since we're at April 22nd now, I hate to say it. I have had to tell that to a couple landscapers recently that they missed the boat on that. But pre-emergence, that does do a pretty decent job. Also, we have what we call contact herbicide that kills only part of the plant touched by a spray. That's an example. Finale, which is in commercials used. Another one called Diclot. Tends to be more commercial than Homeowners. And Roundup, of course, we know that's systemic. It's absorbed into the leaves. I'll mention there is one type of herbicide called gramoxone, which has paraquat, which is highly poisonous. Restricted use, we're not going to buy that. But I worked in commercial landscaping many years ago. I sprayed that stuff. I would spray and hit it with the weed in the morning. It's a contact herbicide, and by the early afternoon, it was already starting to die. Sometimes that chemical is used. It's sprayed on cotton plants in order to defoliate so they can harvest the cotton. Fortunately, it breaks down very quickly. Landscape plant tolerance, even with selected, there are varying degrees of sensitivity, okay? Centipede tolerates atrazine, but fescue does not. Label, read the label. Time of the year can influence herbicide tolerance. One thing about, let's say, a lot of these herbicides like Roundup, if the temperature is too cold, it just won't work. But I've been told, some people say, can we spray Roundup? You'll get this question. You might get this question as master gardeners. Can I apply it to dormant Bermuda grass to control weeds? Well, the answer is no. Because you may think it's dormant, but it rarely gets cold enough in Georgia, North Georgia, to get it completely dormant. Up in the northern states, you may be able to. So you spray that Bermuda grass with Roundup in the winter, and you'll have dead spots in the spring. Also, you got to read if it's above 90 degrees, and this is true with all pesticides, or they'll have a temperature where they may say don't apply if it's above such temperature, or it'll cause damage to desirable plants. This is a sports field that had some type of heat damage and an herbicide. They applied it when it was too hot. This is about 10 years ago in front of the extension office. I knew that there were some people out there spraying, and then I walked out there the following day and saw these dead spots. Every one of them had little broadleaf weeds in it. The temperature had gone up over 100 degrees. It was sprayed. Obviously, that was way too hot to spray, so they had to. That's just something to be aware of. I have seen lawn care companies cook lawns with stuff, so just beware. Always read the pesticide label. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit and show you an example of a pesticide label, and we'll go through it now. Y'all want to take a quick break? Why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back, okay?
Let's resume at about, how about 10:45, Tim? Would that work?
That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. My bad. I'm
That's
still
okay.
trying to figure out the Zoom technology. It's odd when you're not talking to a group. Y'all go take a nice 10-minute break and then get some coffee and then snacks or whatever, and then come back and we'll finish up. We're going to go over the labels. This is a very important stuff. All right, this is an important thing we got to learn about. Let me see. I'm going to make this a little larger where we can see it. I just want to cover this, and I've covered this some about labels. This is the Bayer Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Kills tough brush, roots and all. All right.
Tim, we're not seeing your, it's not advancing. It's still
Okay,
showing as kind of a
label.
frozen screen.
Do what?
It's showing as a frozen screen. It says end show, kind of like what you had at the end before we took a break.
All right. Well, I'm on another
there,
slide.
that's better.
I mean, I took that down and put up did anybody see a pesticide label right here?
It says always read the pesticide label. So it's changed.
All right. All right. Do you see this Bayer Advanced pesticide label that I have?
I don't see Bayer Advanced, no.
All right. Well, we'll just I guess, but you do see the screen, right?
Yeah, the screen changed, so the drop down where it said end presentation went away, and now it's taking up the whole screen, but it's not advancing yet.
All right. Does it say always read pesticide label?
Yeah, but now it's really large. A second ago, it was regular screen size.
All right. But can you see it?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll just go with this. All right.
Now I see the ortho weed be gone.
Yeah.
But it's too big for the you need to minimize what you're showing because it's too big. It's taking up more than it should, more space than it should.
All right, let me see what I can do.
That's better. Now it fits the screen.
I got it on slides.
It should be fine. I can see the whole thing now.
All right, well, let me try something right here. How is that? Is that still too big? Or can you see it? How's it
That
look?
looks good to me.
It's
That
full
works
screen.
good to me.
It looks good?
Yes, to me.
Looks good here. Looks good
It's
here.
full screen now. So if you expand to full screen, you should be fine.
I'm fine, okay? It's where I am right now.
It looks good.
All right, let's keep going. This is just an example of Weed Be Gone, the Brush Killer Plus. This is a good book to have. Weeds of Southern Turf Grasses. I think most of y'all have that. All right, Georgia Pest Management Handbook, Homeowners Edition. I'm going to give y'all a minute to write this down. https://TINYURL.COM/9N5U312. All right. So let me tell you, if you go to that link, this is what will come up. There's actually this is from the University of Georgia, the 2020. You can order this book for $20, but you can go on this for free. Now, if you come here, you'll say commercial edition. That'll be at the top. You don't want that because that's commercial, everything from cotton to corn to orchards to every animals and so forth. This right here will tell you, you know, what you can use, these homeowner products. It'll give you rates to use, what to use, where. But if it conflicts with a label, the label direction takes precedence. So, and there's my contact information. Email me questions. We're getting ready to take questions, but let's give you a second here to get all that information down in case you want. And then we're going to go ahead and entertain our questions. If I can. All right. Thanks. All right, let's get questions. Each person, one question.
If anybody has any questions, can you type them into the chat box and I will read them off to Tim, or you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, you can unmute. Oh, well, I'm acting up again. Okay. Wait a minute. Hold on just a minute.
If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box down below. So Catherine asks, is there a place to email photos of weeds we need identified, Tim?
You can email them to, your agent or program assistant or to my email address, tdaly@uga.edu. Excuse me, I go too fast. tdaly@uga.edu. Definitely.
Thank you. Jean Young wants to know what type of organic herbicide options are available.
All right, yeah, I've got that question. There's people have. I did some research and consulted with one of our weed specialists about vinegar. Vinegar can be used, but you need to get an industrial grade vinegar, like I believe Granger sells that, because the type you buy in the store won't is not strong enough. But industrial grade vinegar is a contact. It will kill them on contact, but it won't get absorbed by the plant. I've had people ask about corn gluten as a pre-emergent, very minimal effectiveness on that. Another good organic control would be hand pulling, hoeing, and stuff like that. Afraid to say that's about the only options you have.
Karen is asking, where can you purchase industrial grade vinegar?
Through Granger. Granger. They sell supplies like that.
Okay.
Or you can search for online sources as well. Horticulture grade vinegar, I believe it's called. It's another name for it.
Okay.
Even
Mary,
that, you follow all label directions.
Gotcha.
Very important.
Mary is asking if you have any experience with Avenger and organic herbicide, and are there any other organic herbicides in the handbook that you might want to mention?
All right, let me check. What is the name of the herbicide?
Avenger.
I'm not familiar with that, but let me check my. It's an basically what I'm looking at, it has the resources I have saying that it has it uses I believe it has a mixture of some organic materials with vinegar, citric acid, clove oil, and some other things. Yeah, it can be used. I'm not against it. It may not be as effective as some of the commercial, but yeah, you can use that. There's many different types out there.
Okay. I've got another question that says some weeds like violets and thistles are food for birds and beneficial for butterflies and pollinators.
Okay,
Could you
Lisa,
address some
you have to repeat that. It won't come through clearly.
Okay, sorry. It says some weeds, and examples are violets and thistles, are both food for wildlife and pollinators.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking, please address these exceptions if you can.
Well, they're food for pollinators. So, a lot of plants, if you want to let the weeds grow for pollinators, that's fine. I mean, I'm not against it, but of controlling it, herbicides are more geared to killing plants than they are insects. And basically, again, if that's a concern, you can hand pull them or dig them out by hose and things like that. Any other questions?
I don't have any more questions in the text box.
Well,
sorry, one more. A question, pony's foot is also called creeping ground ivy, ?
Yeah. Well, creeping ground ivy is something that I've never, maybe that is a common name. Creeping ground ivy is another plant. One thing you got to realize is you may have two plants that have the same common name but are different species. You got your common name and your botanical name. That's why, and of course it can be called, a plant could be called one thing at one location and something at other location somewhere else. So that's why we have the botanical names where that's universal. So that may very well be.
Can you give can you give a little bit of information on the plant called ramps or wild leeks?
Ramps are a wild type of leek that grows, and they kind of like little shady areas. I am somewhat familiar with them. Wild garlic and wild onions aren't ramps. Ramps are they're related. They're leeks that grow wild, and under certain you can cultivate them under certain conditions. It's not a. I have this book on, I believe, farming the forest or forest farming, and it discusses ramps in it about how to grow them. And just have to have a little patience. It's like trying to grow ginseng, which I've tried and haven't had that much luck with. But I think you might have a little better luck with the ramp than you would with ginseng.
Okay, another question. Which is the best herbicide for sedges?
Best herbicide selective control for sedges. Well, there are several that could be used. Hang tight for a minute. Hold on, let me check something.
Just a reminder to everybody, please make sure you mute your audio unless you're actually asking a question. Thank you.
Let me check the Pest Management Handbook here. We're talking about to control sedges, right?
Yes.
Well, this is like selective control. Let's say you got a, Roundup, of course, will do it. There are a lot of cases you don't want to use it. The image consumer concentrate would be good. Image. That works good on sedges. IMAGE. So you might want to try that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have another question. Marianne wants to know what the #1 weed in Georgia is.
The #1 weed in Georgia. Well, that's kind of a hard question. It's a little hard to answer because, you know, it varies throughout the state. And I couldn't really say, you know, some people say that purple nutsedge is one of the worst, especially further south of here. My opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, I think that chamber bitter is the worst weed we have. Because I can't ever stay ahead of that. But again, that's my opinion. But,
I agree. I hate that stuff in my garden.
ooh, yeah, and yeah, it'll be
Great.
coming up soon. Any other questions?
Got another one. Brush killer. The label says that it kills stumps, but does it kill every stump?
Well,
Or
if it's
only-
used according to label yeah, according to label directions, it should. Now, it won't control, let's say you got bamboo, because that brush killer, sometimes it's sold as bonide, bonid, cut stump and vine killer. That has triclopyr. Triclopyr is a chemical that only does broadleaf, won't hurt grassy. And if you have bamboo, that's considered a grass, so it won't work. But most everything else, it will. Apply it according to label directions, and it will keep the stumps from resprouting. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Last call
What?
on questions.
All right. Well, listen, if you got questions, just email them to me, and we will resume at 1 o'clock for the next session, all right? And I will load those slides up right after this is finished, all right? Thanks for joining us. I'll see you in a couple hours. Lisa, thanks for your help.